Yo, what's crackerjacking, everybody? What's happening? This is another episode of the TBN cast or the Nance cast. I don't know, man. I don't care about names. It is what it is. It needs a name, so I can have a name for it, but I don't really care. Welcome to another exciting episode. I was joined by a guest. Just, within the last half hour, we got off the call. It was a great episode, great conversation. It was weird. I started it in the middle of conversation. I started recording in the middle of conversation, which is, I think, the best way to start recording. You just go. But I told him, okay, hey, I'm going to start recording now. But yeah, I was like in the middle of a conversation. So it was always a bit weird, like just posting that when there is no like introduction to the conversation. I didn't introduce him to any of you. This man needs no introduction. It's Benjamin Studebaker, the homie. If you know who I am, you should know who he is. And it's not the other way around. So that he definitely needs no introduction. He's the man. He's the homie. He's the dude. He joined me. We had a great conversation, and it was good. And here it is. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just slap this on the front of the video because, again, it's a little awkward. It just starts. But yeah, here we go. And then when we get to the end of the conversation, I similarly would just kind of say goodbye without any, oh, do you have anything you want to plug or blah, 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 anything like that. I don't really care about that stuff. I think it is important and it does matter. But I didn't do it. So anyway, yeah, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy. I'll see you soon. And then I'll upload this probably this week. I've been feeling really under the weather, which is why we're not live right now. But I also want to get back in the swing of things, coming back off tour, and just get back in the swing of things. So anyway, it is nice to see you digitally or see your digital representation and kind of be here for a conversation that it stemmed from. I was listening to like the second half of your seminar, and I found myself wanting to interject when you were talking about disagreement, and I felt some disagreement. I didn't know exactly what it was or where it was coming from, but I was like, well, I'm here late. I'm not caught up. I'm not going to be the guy that kind of hijacks and derails this conversation to put my foot down. And now I can't even I've been trying to get back, connect with where I was, what that feeling of disagreement was, and I can't find it. I don't know. It probably was just like a situational thing. But disagreement, I like disagreement, and I've been thinking a lot about that over the last kind of couple weeks. What is, I don't know, what is it? Like there's a kind of contrarian, I don't know, like immature person who always wants to disagree, and I think I've been that guy at various points in my life, and I think maybe that's an important position to keep sight of. Like you always want to leave space for disagreement. You never want to be the guy who finds yourself just kind of up doing soliloquies and never being willing to listen to the other, listen to disagreement and difference and contradiction. We are some type of Marxists or whatever. We've read a lot of Marx, so we know that contradiction is important. We know that like there is something to be gained from disagreement as such. But what even is disagreement? I don't know. I also think I'm not that contrarian guy anymore. Like I still see him and I still recognize him. I remember the first lecture you gave was, or the first lecture you gave with Theory Underground was time energy. Was it before Plato or before Descartes?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was good. Yeah. And I liked it. But when you got to Plato and the one, I found myself wanting to be the contrarian and say, well, what is this one of which you speak, and I just want to reject it. And now, having listened to you and having had some conversations with you, I don't want to push back on the idea of the one as hardly, but there is still that little contrarian that lives in me, and I think it's important. I also think it's important to be able to, wipe his face with a rag and comb his hair and say, okay, go back to the sandbox, because it is an immature kind of position to take. So I don't know. There's
a potential distinction: immature versus mature disagreement.
So what would that look like? What is maturity even? What did I mean when I just said immature? I'm a parent, and actually last night I was talking to one of my kids. She's taking a political ideologies course, and we sat and talked for a couple hours about politics and about ideology, and she interviewed me for a class project she's doing. Having that conversation with this child who I've seen grow from being like a weird little awkward kid who's like dirty and smelly and doesn't listen and can't clean their room and doesn't do anything right. And now, she's going off to university, and she's becoming a young woman. She has matured in a way, but I don't know. What is maturity? Is maturity giving up on that kind of childish energy that allows you to believe in magic? Not magic as such, but like I was an anarchist when I was a teenager. I was this radical anarchist, and I was like, we can change the world. And now I'm a 39-year-old man, and I don't even know if I believe in change anymore. Is that maturity, or is that something other than maturing? I don't know. Take that and go where you want.
I think it's to do with philautia, with the love of the self. So before you have reached a point in development where you have achieved the love of the self, when you disagree, the disagreement will be motivated by something inadequate that you're feeling in you, and a desire to enjoy a dunk, get off in a kind of erotic way on having something on somebody, or to feel higher status, to kind of boost your esteem, your sense of worth, because you can see through something somebody else is doing. So in those cases, the purpose of the disagreement is not to get somewhere in terms of understanding the thing that the disagreement is about, but instead to in some way buttress the self, which has not yet reached a stage of development where it is able to participate in the discussion about something other than itself. So once you get to philautia, once you get to a level of self-love, then when you're in a conversation, what you do isn't about filling in whatever is missing, but is about the common object. Because a disagreement has to be about something. It has to be about some object that both of the people who are in the disagreement are in reference to. And they have to both, to have a mature disagreement, care about this common object, want to understand its good, and to articulate some vision of what to do to further its good. But if somebody in the disagreement isn't actually concerned with that object and is instead participating in the discussion to get some benefit for themselves, then it seems like you're having a disagreement about the common knowledge object, but actually you have something else going on under the cloak of that, which is really to do with the dissatisfactions of the unreconstructed person.
So the contrarian would be kind of properly immature. Like the person who is just always going to disagree would be this immature position. And then
right. Because to always disagree, how could you be motivated by the object?
Right.
If you were motivated by the object, then it would be a question of whether what someone was saying really did seem to accord with the good of the object.
Yeah. And then
but if you always disagree, then you must not be interested in the object,
Yeah, you're
but
not
in
even
something else.
you're not even listening to the conversation being had in front of you. You're here playing a different game entirely. Um, Last week I did a little podcast episode where Descartes came up and doubt and skepticism kind of came, and it was just me. So it's not like it kind of came up like I was talking. I was doing this soliloquy, and I found my way to just kind of briefly touch on Descartes. And I've been really feeling Descartes over the last probably year, and I want to bring Descartes and Levinas together in a way. I think Levinas can actually rescue Descartes, and I think Descartes can intensify the message of Levinas. So I find myself coming back to Descartes, and I find myself coming back to the idea of doubt, the idea of skepticism, that I think kind of goes hand in hand with disagreement. I find myself disagreeing with the narrative I've been told as a 21st century American citizen. I disagree with it. I'm skeptical of it. I'm not a convinced true believer. But there's like a silly thing that has happened, I think, to Descartes. I do think Descartes does need to be rescued. I think the idea of radical skepticism or radical doubt has been turned into like paranoia. I think Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, God rest his soul, and those guys, the kind of four horsemen of the apocalypse, I think they were paranoid. They were not skeptical. And I don't know. I'm just now kind of realizing I think those guys are immature, and I think that's their problem. They lack this form of self-love. That's, I feel weird using that language, because that, like, the idea of self-love, what you're talking about, is kind of really rich and robust, and I think fundamental to a like a proper viewpoint on the world. But it's been turned into Instagram ads for those things that you rub on your face: self-care, take care of yourself, girl, and this and that. But no, you do need security, like security in the self. I think those guys lacked that, and I think what has been done to Descartes, like Descartes' been turned into this kind of sniveling new atheist type contrarian guy. And I don't think he was, but that this doesn't matter. This is kind of tangential. I'm just going back to, there is a qualitative difference in the different forms of disagreement one can have. And maybe that's an insecurity that I have. Like, maybe I'm insecure when I find myself disagreeing with someone. Like, am I just being the contrarian, or do I have like a proper philosophical disagreement here? But maybe it's good to always ask yourself that question.
Yeah, I think that is a good question to ask. And philautia, the kind of self-love I'm talking about, does sometimes get confused with something like pride or the self-esteem movement,
Mm-hmm.
a kind of uncritical affirmation of wherever somebody is at, or something like self-care. But really, it's coming to be at peace with your flaws.
Mm.
And instead of feeling like you need to be perfect, accepting and recognizing that you're a person who has various limitations, being okay with those limitations, being able to work with those limitations because you've acknowledged them on some level. You have a self-awareness,
Mm.
right? Self-awareness is the beginning of virtue,
Mm.
because once you're self-aware, then you're not expecting yourself to be able to do things that you can't actually do. So you're not holding yourself to unrealistic standards, like the standard of you have to always be right, you have to always already know everything, and there can't be anything that you don't know or anything that you might be wrong about. So if anybody says anything that makes you feel any doubt about what you know or what you think, that you have to brush this away. And a lot of this, I do think, comes from growing up in an environment where you get a certain amount of care and concern from the people around you, who will say to you, on the one hand, you're not perfect, You do have flaws. You need to work on some things, but these flaws that you have don't make you unworthy of love. So to have family members and friends who love you but also push you invites this kind of thinking where you can acknowledge and accept that your imperfections don't make you unworthy.
So yeah, I think the kind of the self image, the identity has been captured and turned into um, the only valuable resource that anyone has or has access to. And so it's important to be like it, and it's very kind of prevalent in academia. It's prevalent in the influencer sphere. It's kind of all over the media environment, but it's also in our like everyday lives, like people that have Instagram, people that have Twitter, people that are on Substack, like people that normal everyday people, there's still a pressure to be this commodity, to be this identity, to be seen as this person who is not lacking. So having a home life, having a family where you have access to people who will kind of compassionately tell you that you're not perfect. I think it's important. I think a lot of people don't have that. And you see it, I think, with children today. Like, I was raised by television largely. And I think it's contributed to some of my eccentricities or quirks. But I also think I've overcome it. But now kids are being raised by the algorithm. Kids are being raised by Instagram and TikTok and the internet, where there is no negativity. There is no space to kind of take the lack and reincorporate it into a well-adjusted individual. And it's funny, like saying words like self-care and well-adjusted, like using these ego psychology, the communities that use that language the most are like the most toxic places. There is no space for negativity. There is no space for actual lack. Like it's all just performative. And that's why like the DSM, like children, like I see it with like, not in my kids because we talk about stuff, but in the communities they're parts of, like I see these kids who the first thing that they introduce themselves with is their list of diagnoses. Like they'll come up and they'll talk about like, this is what's wrong with me, and this is my unique struggle. And these things are like valuable in these weird economic word games that are being played now with their identities. But it's all performative. Like there's no actual negation or actual lack going on. It's all just affirmation, and it's all you have to be the perfect bipolar person. Like when you go on social media and you perform your bipolar, you have to be the best one. I don't know. It's super interesting.
There's this ersatz of accepting flaws. People think that when they acknowledge a diagnosis or something, that they are accepting their flaws. But what they're actually doing is taking pride in an account of their flaws that has been given to them by some authority figure. That's very different from recognizing that you have certain limits. These are bad. It's not good to be unable to understand things and to be bad at various skills. None of this is good. To have various incapacities and weaknesses, none of that is good. But it doesn't make you unworthy of love.
Mm.
And you can improve a little bit, a little bit. You'll never be perfect, but you can improve a little bit in various areas if you commit and take seriously the work that you need to do to get better.
Mm. Mm.
But it starts with acknowledging I'm not good at something. It's not good that I'm not good at it. I don't want to be someone who's not good at it forever. And then to undertake the steps to get better at that thing, which often involves finding someone who is better at that thing, saying, I'm not good at this. I want to be better at it. Will you please help me?
Mm.
And then accepting the help with the criticism that help will necessarily come with, you know. and the pointing out you're still not doing it right. This is still not as good as it should be. You could still do better than this.
Mm.
That process. Uh, but you can't undertake that process if you haven't reached that level of development.
Mm.
Because instead, when you get the criticism, it will cut to the heart of the narrative that you're already perfect, or
Mm.
that your diagnosis makes you whole or makes you someone valuable.
Mm.
It actually blocks and obstructs the growth if you haven't reached that stage. So one of the things that is very difficult if you're in a teaching position is you'll sometimes get students who, through no fault of their own, have not reached that level of self-love that's necessary to undergo a really thorough kind of pedagogy. They might be smart enough, they might be talented enough, they might have an intellectual ability that is through the roof. But if they don't have that level of character development, they're still not going to be teachable. And when we would interview students at Cambridge, this is something that we would talk about. Is this student teachable? Can you teach this student, or will the student get upset at the attempt to teach them such that they will become resistant to the teaching? And that would be a reason to not take somebody at a Cambridge college,
Mm.
even if they were otherwise very bright, because if they have a character that is going to make them resistant to the process, they're not going to get as much out of that process as someone who might be maybe a step slower, but at the level of character is ready to undergo the process.
Mm. It, I don't know. It's funny that talking about, I don't know. I think maybe talking about any real problem that we have today, I think it's probably true that we could find our way back to love, like not having enough. And that's a weird way to say that, but not having that type of love in one's life, the individual, the subject, whatever, not having a certain type of love being at or near the root of whatever dysfunction it is that we're trying to talk. Like I think a lot of our political issues go back to a lack of love, and in the different types of love. A lot of like interpersonal relationship issues, like this person just doesn't have enough of one or the other types of love. I don't know. I think it's worth pointing out that I do think it's true that love is a weird word. What do you mean when you say love? I just published a short story that I liked it a lot. But it's a love story, and I made it a love story between one man and one woman because it's hard to talk about love like in general, like just a general love of the other, or like diffuse love. It's hard to talk about that. It's hard to make that land and kind of make it have stakes for people. So I used a love story to frame it, which it's not satisfying to me. Like I don't want to have to tell a romantic love story between one man and one woman to get the point across where I'm trying to talk about like a human recognition. But I don't know, the language always seems to fail. When you bring up love, there's always a weird disconnect.
Because it's going to mean something really different to someone who is mature versus isn't mature, right? If you're immature, then somebody loving you seems to mean that you're going to have pleasurable experiences with that person and that they're going to make you feel good about yourself. Whereas once you've crossed into the terrain of maturity by getting over that philautia barrier and you've reconstructed yourself, then love becomes about being devoted to something outside of you, to some notion of a family unit of whatever kind, structure, depending on exactly how you and
Mm-hmm.
the other person or people decide to go about making it. But then at that point, you're not focused on having a good time or feeling good about yourself. You're focused on how you can contribute to something meaningful that goes beyond you. And then you and that other person can have disagreements about what's good for that thing, that family unit. And now you're in a conversation where you can have a real disagreement about something that matters, as opposed to what activity are we going to do so that I have a good time or feel good about myself? Maybe we'll have sex in the way that I like to have it today, and
Mm.
then tomorrow we'll have sex in the way that you'd like to have it, and we'll transact, and our relationship will be a series of bargains.
Mm.
That kind of pragmatic arrangement that is about exchanging erotic moments or exchanging feelings of recognition is very different from coming together, making a family, recognizing that your body and what it wants is a secondary factor relative to what the family needs. And then to be in conversations with someone that are principally about the family and what's good for it.
Mm.
And then to have disagreements about that, that's very serious.
Mm.
And when a relationship fails because of intractable disagreements about what would be good for the family unit, that's a really meaningful reason for a relationship to fail.
Mm-hmm.
That's much more profound than, we were sexually incompatible.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is a bit absurd. It seems like there are a lot of people who never reach that depth in their relationships. Now, I think that's largely due to economic factors. Like, I think that's a material problem. You just don't have time for relationships to develop. But it's also, it seems to be the case that maturity is a process of like a subjective destitution, like when the utopian image shatters, and that it is the reconstruction of the self and the world, and you reconstruct that in a more well-adjusted arrangement where you kind of understand there's a give and take and you have to make trade-offs, and you can't adopt this kind of paranoid point of view where it's all about your immediate gratification and everyone else is a utility. It's either they're going to increase my satisfaction or my gratification, or they're going to decrease. So everything is transactional. It seems like the process of maturity is one of subjective destitution. I feel like everybody is subjectively destitute. Everybody just in general, like broadly, the modern political subject, I feel like they are destitute in this subjective way. There's something holding them back from reaching the process of reconstruction. Now, again, I think that's largely material. Like you can't really reconstruct any of that when you're constantly working, when you're constantly anticipating, oh, I have to pay the bills. Oh, I have to satisfy my boss. I have to worry about this and that, when you're stuck in precarity and scarcity.
Yeah, oftentimes people will respond to not having had the prerequisites for self-reconstruction by attempting to grab an ersatz of it. And I love midlife crisis movies about middle-aged people who run into the limits of this, who finally go, wait a minute, none of this actually solved any of my problems, but instead buried it in various kinds of structural impasses that now heavily constrain me. A lot of, some people, and it's so sad when this happens, will make families, have children, spend decades with another person, and never get to the point of doing it for the sake of family, but still the whole time doing it to try to fill in a gap and engaging in it in some sort of transactional way. And when you're a child and you're brought up in a family that is constituted on the basis of transactionality, that was never a full family in the full sense of that term, then you're going to be operating without certain prerequisites that are going to make it hard for you as you become an adult to enter into this other way of interacting or thinking. Part of what helps us to overcome ourselves is the exposure at a young age to people who have overcome themselves and who are able to make interventions into our lives to kind of direct or shape our course of development. Interventions that are based not on what makes them feel good. Like, for instance, if your parent didn't make it as a sports athlete and then had you so that you can make it as a sports athlete so that they feel good about themselves, that's not a reason to have a child. But a lot of children are had on that basis and then have to figure out how to live after having been brought into the world for that reason.
Mm.
That's an incredibly hard thing to do because such a person will not have any exposure to someone who loves them as part of a family unit. That person doesn't really have the concept of the family. They may use the word, they may try to pretend on some level to themselves that they understand what it means, but on some level, they never quite get there. And if you're brought up in a family where the concept is not understood by the people running it, even if it's not an abusive home or a home which would, straightforwardly strike us as terrible from the point of view of ordinary liberal mores and norms, it's going to produce a person who's really going to have a hard time finding their way unless they are lucky enough to run into somebody who can make an intervention. And the further along you get in life, the harder it is for other people to make interventions that help you. Because when you're an adult and an adult is trying to intervene in your life, the impulse is to go, well, who do you think you are trying to intervene in my life?
Yep.
What, you think you're better than me? Especially an unreconstructed person is especially likely to respond with, what, you think you're better than me?
Mm.
Because they haven't yet reached the point of being at peace with their limits and flaws.
Mm. God, man, yeah. It's I don't know. It's a systemic problem. It's a structural problem, and it feels, I don't know, it feels bad, man. It's not good. Um I think, well, I don't know, maybe this is actually a pathway to the brief conversation we had before we started recording, where we were talking about art in theory. I think art is often an attempt by people who are trapped in these kind of very transactional families or situations. I think a lot of people discover art and try to use art, not in a, I don't know, not use, but try to allow art to be a line of flight out of this kind of transactional world, and art to be the conduit of this like discovery and reconstruction. I feel like theory and philosophy is that as well for many people, and maybe there's different types of people who gravitate to one or the other. But that raises, I don't know, I guess that kind of raises the question: theory, art. What is theory? What is art? Do they disagree? Can they ever coincide? Are they mutually exclusive? I don't know, but I don't know. What do you think about theory versus art?
Yeah, I think people do sometimes have, nonetheless, despite their upbringing, some sense that there's something that goes beyond that transactionality. And the arts, especially, I think, are a common way for people to try, initially groping in the dark, to worm their way out of an overly stultifying situation. But yes, I do tend to think that the arts and theory are a little different.
Hmm.
If I meet someone who's an artist, there is just a limit to the degree to which they can talk about abstract stuff just at the level of language.
Mm-hmm.
There's a need for the artist to put it into some other format. Even if we're talking about someone who is a fiction writer or a poet, it can't simply be a prosaic theoretical description. There are a lot of people who can write novels and who can write poems, but who would never write, say, a university press book about a concept, for whom that would seem to be an obvious waste of time for them, something they would never attempt to do and wouldn't feel on any level drawn to do. But they can be fascinated in a conversation or in an interaction with a theorist who might do something like that. And conversely, I think if you're a theorist, there is just a limit to your desire capacity or motivation to put the concepts into the concrete and to make an image or a physical representation. In some way, the making of the physical representation would seem to distort it too much. You'd be too dissatisfied with anything you would make at that level. And then for the artist, if it remains at the level of theory, because it hasn't been concretized, there's something dissatisfying about that.
Yeah.
And these are kind of different priorities. And I think they both have merit. And I think that's why theorists and artists can't reject each other, but always feel like the other has something that they're missing.
Hmm.
The theorist always kind of would like there to be a concrete instantiation of the theory, but never really feels quite up to making that. And the artist would always like to have it all cashed out in very theoretically precise terms and would like to feel explained, known, understood in a very tight way, but never feels like what they're doing can simply be reduced to that.
So there's I don't know, with this framing, art versus theory, there's like a constitutive negation that's kind of like, yeah, like art. There is something dissatisfying about art, like trying to, because I think largely art, largely, I don't know, maybe even totally, although not totally, near totally, art is in language. I do think there is like a pre-linguistic something in art, at least good art, or art with a capital A. But art is in language, and there's something like just inherently dissatisfying about language, that when you try to take a concept or even a feeling, and express it in language, like it's always going to fail. I feel like the theorist, I don't know. Like I think it's the same negation that the theorist and the artist come up against. Like the theorist is trying to do this like exhaustive, I don't know, something with a concept, with an idea, with a feeling. I don't know. And the artist is doing the same thing. They both reach this point of failure. Is it in the method? Is that the difference between theory and art? Is it all just like in how you attempt to do the expressing of the thing? Is that what makes it one or the other?
Yeah, I used to think when I was in undergrad that methodological disputes were, who cares about that? That's not substantive. I was never very interested when I was a younger person in my 20s in methods. Even at the beginning of my PhD, I thought, who cares about methods? Just let everybody do things their way. What's the big idea? As I've gotten older, it has become evident to me that the method, it really does distinguish a person, because the method, the way that you regularly operate, really structures how you think.
Hmm.
And each of the disciplines, for instance, in the social sciences or the humanities, they all talk about a lot of the same things. It's not as if the subject matter of the different social science and humanities disciplines is so utterly distinct. What's really different is the method. It's what they care about when they engage with the material, what it is that matters most to them. And similarly with artists, beauty is what is ultimately going to matter to the artist. Beauty is what's ultimately going to matter. And even having it operationally, even having it in an incomplete or imperfect way, beauty has to be an operation for you to have it at all. You have to actually make something. You have to make it, and that is always going to be where this has to end up for the artist. It has to end up in beauty. And the theorist, well, the theorist is happy if the book is beautiful. The theorist will also often write sentences that are not beautiful because these seem to be necessary in some way to accomplish the theorist's purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to go the long
Yeah.
way. You have to do the long division. You have to. But it makes it
Yeah.
not beautiful. It makes it unappealing to the ear or to the eye.
Yeah, a lot of theory is almost disgusting even.
Yeah.
To just read it as prose if you compare it to a novel. But then there's this concern that the theorist has that if I were to just write a novel, that it would all just be too surface level and it wouldn't actually get at the stuff. And people would read the novel too many different ways and they would miss the point. They would miss the point. And maybe if I'm more precise and more specific and I put my terms together very carefully, yeah, and an artist might think this way about painting, about getting the brush strokes just right, or playing the notes on the instrument just right. They might think about all of those little details in that way, but they would have to be physical in character. And the evaluation would be, is this a beautiful sound?
Yep.
The theorist thinks that there might be something good or true that they can get at by departing to some degree from what is beautiful. And the artist thinks that there's something beautiful that they can get at by departing to some degree from what is good or true.
Yeah. Yeah, I think art, I don't know. I like art, and I don't even know what that means when I say it. Like I don't know what art is. And I don't like popular art. I don't know. Most of the art that I really, really like is like I love Rothko. I think Rothko's maybe my favorite painter, and I don't know if that's beautiful. I think like he's very popular. People love Rothko, but like there is a departure from this idea of like correctness. Like you look at just a field of blue on a canvas, and it is incorrect. And unless you've kind of taken the time to sit with it and develop your own taste, you would look at it and say, that's not beautiful. That's incorrect. I think art is trying to say something true by using lies, like by intentionally departing from truth in order to try to say something that may or may not be true. But maybe it's true lowercase t. And I think maybe the theorist is concerned with capital T truth. And isn't that, I don't know. So the good, if both categories or types of person are trying to approach the good, the theorist has a commitment to true, capital T, and the artist has a commitment to beauty, maybe. I don't know. I think that's a satisfying distinction.
Yeah, and I think at the level of abstraction, we could say that the good and the beautiful are kind of two faces of the same thing that emphasize different aspects, but of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there can seem to be a clash between the good and the beautiful. But this is because when you pursue the beautiful, you will make mistakes which will erase bits of the good occasionally. And when you pursue the good, you will make mistakes which erase parts of the beautiful occasionally.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm comfortable with all that, and I think it all checks out. Now, kind of pushing further in that conversation, art versus theory, and this, I don't know, this conversation's been had millions of times before, but I hope it never dies because I think it's an important conversation. But trudging further on into that wilderness, there does always seem to be a thing where people say you can't be both. You must choose. Which way, Western man? You approach a fork in the woods and you must choose. And maybe look, I don't think it's ever that silly. I don't think the way you said it earlier was that silly, but like there is a divergence, and you must be on one path or the other. You can't be on both paths simultaneously. And I wonder if that's true. Like, there is a sense that it's true. But the contrarian in me wants to push back and say, Benjamin, I can have my cake and eat it too. Now, I don't think I can. I wouldn't call myself either a theorist or an artist. But there's something in me that wants to say, no, they can coincide. Now, look, I think it's obvious that they can coincide, but I think you can be on both paths at the same time. Now, I think it would probably take a great deal of deliberate effort to achieve that. But I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't even know if that's interesting or like worth having a conversation about, because I don't know. We briefly talked a little bit before we started recording, and the way you kind of articulated the distinction, I liked it. I don't know if you want to go back there, but I was like, that's interesting. Now, what does that mean? Dude, like, we're talking about the non-relation, we're talking about the all versus the not all, and kind of getting in there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know the sexuation of the artist versus the theorist. I like it, but there's still something. Like, there's the little contrarian in me that's like jumping up and down to just say, no, I reject this all. I want to have both.
Yeah, my impulse was to compare it to sexual difference, to frame the theorist would be the masculine and the artist would be perhaps the feminine in terms of stereotypical coding. Now, that's not to say, of course, that these are completely separate and distinct domains, that women can't do theory or that men can't do art, right? We would never say something like that.
Yeah, of
So
course.
it could never be that sharp a distinction.
Yeah.
But that there would be a sense in which if you have a dispositional lean in one direction, you can learn from the other side. You can benefit from talking to the other side. You can incorporate certain things from the other side's approach into what you do, but you can never simply possess the other side outright. You have to be continuously in dialogue with it to maintain that connection. So to give one concrete example, my fiance, Sam, who you've met, she writes novels, and she's currently working on a sci-fi novel. And the other day, we were talking about it, and yeah, as we were going over it, she was kind of doing her tidal wave of it, where she was telling me all of the different things that are going on, just in her very excited way, running over the different plot points, and thinking about it and how she's going to write it up as she's explaining it to me. And I asked her about the political motivations of the characters, and I asked her about what's the relationship of certain parts of the story to capitalism. These are the kinds of questions that will occur to me as a theorist. And she'll have answers to these questions. And by talking to me about the politics of the story, she'll improve in various ways the way that she treats these things. And she cares about treating these things in a way that is serious and robust and compelling. And over the course of our relationship, she's gotten really good at it, to the point where I don't even have to give that much advice or correct very much. I'm often really impressed by some of the stuff that she comes up with without me even having to say, well, what about this? What about that? But what I notice is that when I raise those questions, she is happy enough to explain those things to me, and she's happy to have those things in the story. But the motivation for the story is not quite identical to that. The stuff that is most exciting to her are the little details in the story, the little witty moments in the conversations among the characters. It's not the themes. It's not the story's overarching theoretical message that is the real motivation. ultimately. That's there. And to me, my impulse, if I were explaining her work to someone, would be to talk about that stuff. And she would be happy for me to
Mm,
do that because it makes her work seem important and connected to things that matter in a big, deep sense. But where is her drive? Her drive is in imagining these characters having these specific little small moments with each other and the way that that makes her feel, the reality of that physical, interaction, that dialogue.
mm,
Dialogue for her is always where she's happiest, when
mm,
she's telling me about a conversation that people are having. And that's just a different emphasis. And so she's benefited to some degree from being in dialogue with me. And in the same way, I will take my work and I will have her read it. And she will tell me if my work has become too ugly
mm,
or too pretentious
mm,
or insufficiently appropriate for an ordinary person to read. And when she does
mm,
that, I'll go, oh, I don't want it to be that way.
mm,
And I can make my writing beautiful.
mhm,
But I am not, when I go into writing a piece, simply trying to write a beautiful piece.
mm.
That's never my principal goal. And I could much more readily accept that my piece is not the most beautiful piece you've ever read, if it's the only piece perhaps that you've read that makes a certain point or makes you see something in a particular way.
Yeah. So intentionality. Um, okay. I think I'm starting to
At
see
the
more
level of the
clearly.
drive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so that's, I don't know, a lot easier to stomach than the person just coming along and saying, you must choose. It's Sophie's choice. You have to choose one or the other. I want to reject that, but actually kind of breaking it down, it makes sense, and I do believe it. And again, uh, not using kind of totalizing language. We have to use this language to say what we're trying to say, but I don't know if anyone's listening. We're not out here talking about sexuation and kind of doing the weird thing where we're saying this type of person cannot do the other thing. Like, there is always wiggle room. There is always gray areas and kind of moments of peanut butter and chocolate coming together. But no, okay. I think I kind of understand the distinction now. I find myself in the moment asking, like, what are my intentions? And I think, because I always get a bit like, I lack the philote. I lack the self-love. Like, I feel like some people are attacking me when they say you can't be both. Because I write fiction, but I also write non-fiction. And I think of myself as engaged with theory and philosophy, but also engaged with fiction. Like, the recent story I published, I think, and then the one I published before that, like I wrote a piece about Whitehead, and I was taking down Whitehead. Someone said, "Yeah, you curb stomped Whitehead in this little short story," and it made me feel good. I was like, I was trying to talk about my problems with process philosophy and with Whitehead. Like, I was expressing, in my opinion, some of the failures of process philosophy, but I did it by way of a short story instead of writing like an essay about why I don't like Alfred North Whitehead. I don't think I could write that essay as well as I wrote the story that I wrote. But then there are essays that I write that have nothing, like, it could not be a piece of fiction. Like, it just has to be this quote unquote ugly essay. So I feel like when people say the thing, I take it as a personal attack and it makes me uncomfortable. But no, the intentionality, I think there are times when I intend to say, like, I don't know, I'm writing on value and waste right now. Like, and I'm trying to write this essay that I've been trying to write for like 2 years at this point. And it will be it is currently very ugly. But it just needs to be that way. It has to be a very procedural kind of unfolding argument type thing. And that's the intention behind it. But then there are times when I do intend to, I don't know, tell a story. So I think bringing it back to intentionality and drive makes it make sense to me. I don't feel personally attacked, and I think I get it.
Yeah, I wrote a short story some years ago called The Parable of the Spooky Forest. And when I wrote this short story, I was so incredibly pleased with myself because I had made some art. And this is how I often will feel if I do stray into, because I'm a theorist who sometimes, occasionally, rarely makes art.
Mm.
And if I can be a theorist and make art, I feel very happy about what has gone on.
Yeah.
But I always feel like when I'm doing it, that I am wandering into somebody else's territory, somewhere that I don't quite belong, and trying to, yeah, and I almost, if I write fiction, I almost feel like I can only write a parody of fiction.
Mm. Mm.
Because that's just not quite where I'm most at home. So when I write fiction, I tend to be tropey, I tend to be tongue in cheek, I tend to, because I can't take myself fully seriously as a writer of fiction. I recognize myself as just not quite that thing. What I do gives me enough analogous skills that I can imitate someone who writes fiction. I can write a piece of fiction that somebody might like.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be the same as someone for whom that is their principal drive and motivation.
Right.
And that's always in my mind whenever I stray into it. I'm a visitor. I'm an interloper. I can do it, but it's not where I'm at home.
So I think feeling like a pretender, feeling like the interloper, the outlander, I think there's an element of like I feel like I'm always pretending. Like I now I don't know, that's probably a me problem. Like and I do think I'm halfway decent at overcoming it most of the time. The imposter syndrome. Let's we'll go to Instagram and we'll watch a bunch of shorts or reels or whatever they call them about our imposter syndrome, and then we'll feel good about ourselves, and then we'll accomplish nothing because we'll spend all day long watching affirmations and positive content. But no, I do feel like the imposter syndrome thing, that's a necessary tension. I feel like everyone has a unique singular relation to it. There's times when I'm writing, and there is no imposter syndrome. There's times when I'm writing and I believe I am the greatest writer in the world. And then there's times when I feel like I'm the worst writer in the world. And, I think it's an individual thing you have to navigate. So making a prescriptive statement about it would be ridiculous in the first place. But I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to say, I think in art, pretense is a necessary part of art. I think you have to be high on your own supply in order to do art, or maybe not all the time. Courage.
You have to have courage to act when you're not sure and you know that whatever you make is going to be imperfect.
Yeah.
You're not sure that the decisions that you're making when you make art are right.
Yeah.
You know that you're going to end up making something that's imperfect in various ways, but you make it anyway.
Yeah. I think I feel that. I do think I feel that less when I'm writing theory or when I'm writing nonfiction, because it's easy to kind of go to a book and look up the reference and kind of get, now once again, always allowing for like my own fallibility. Like I don't think I understand everything. Like I think it's necessary to incorporate that negativity and always say, well, I could be wrong about this. Nevertheless, I'm going to go on and continue making an argument. But there's a distinction between that type of courage of the artist, where it is just kind of head in the clouds. I'm doing this because the muse is speaking through me. And there's a different type of courage that the theorist has that you just kind of embrace the fallibility and say, I'm not making grand universal proclamations. I'm making the argument that I'm making right now, and I'm backing it up with support, and I'm kind of drawing on traditions that go back to the beginning of whatever school it is. But there's still pretense. Like you still have to have courage. Now, is courage from that reconstructed self? Does courage come from that type of robust self-love, or I don't know, does it come from somewhere else?
Yeah, I think that the robust self-love is a necessary prerequisite for real courage.
Mm.
In the absence of that, what you tend to instead do is create through pride. So when I was younger and I was less formed as a person, I would create more readily, but I was less careful and less reverential when I would make stuff because I was young and thought that I knew what was what. I would just shoot my shot all the time. Now I write a little bit less frequently than I used to. And I focus more on, am I in the right energy for the thing that I'm trying to work on? Am I going to be able to do it well? And I'm more discerning about what kinds of things I write and why. And I assess more, where am I in terms of my headspace relative to what it is I'm trying to do. Like I have this project, that I call Red Marble, which is the book I want to write that tries to put Platonism and Marxism together formally. And this is something that I feel I have to have certain prerequisites to be able to do. I need certain things to be right in terms of the way my routine is. I need certain things to be right in terms of the way my work is being received and understood, so that I know that I am really able to speak to people about these things in such a way that I'm being understood. And I have I need a courage to do it. I can't use all of these things as excuses not to write it. But at the same time, I also need a humility to recognize that that book, if it's ever to be any good, has to come from a certain kind of place that I have to actually be in. And I can't just pretend I'm in that place when I'm not in that place and write it anyway.
Mm-hmm. So maturity, I think that loops back around to, you have to be mature enough to do either theory or art. I think here we're primarily concerned, maybe not primarily, we're more concerned with theory here than we are with art, though art is important. Your partner's an artist. Spend a lot of time talking about art. And you incorporate art into your work. And I think I love the way you write. Both The Way Is Shut and Legitimacy, I think, are extremely well written. I think there are moments where you do a turn of phrase, where you do something that I feel like, oh, that was a turn of phrase. Oh, that was enjoyment. That was libidinal in a good way. Like I can see the enjoyment and not the negative, not the bad kind of enjoyment. I can see the pleasure you take in writing. When I read your work, I think you're not just a good theorist. You're not just a good writer. You're having fun while you're doing it, and I think that's probably important to being good and being able to continue doing it. But coming back to maturity, you have to be mature enough to do this, to do it seriously. What the hell is maturity? Again, when I was young, I was very kind of full of piss and vinegar and very convinced of, anarchism and Marxism later. And I was very, very convinced. And then as I got older, all the things that happened to me happened. And now I find myself, like, I still am committed to the idea of emancipation, the idea of kind of the human. I don't know what these things mean anymore, but I'm not convinced in the same way that I was when I was younger. Is the grumpy old man missing something? Like, is maturity forever losing contact with something, or is it something else? I don't know.
So I think a lot of grumpy old men are immature.
Ooh, ooh. I
Because part of
agree.
what the grumpy old man does
I agree.
is decide, nah, this is the way things are. I don't need to think about this stuff anymore. Anybody who demands that I think about this stuff just that hasn't seen as much as I've seen of the world.
Hmm.
And so there's a kind of prideful placing yourself above all of the domains of seeking that other people are in or that other people might invite you to participate in. And to say, I don't need to seek after anything. I already have everything that I need. This is the attitude of the young person who thinks they already know everything.
Hmm.
So it can be replicated in an old person. And when an old person is acting that way, they're acting more like a teenager than they are like a mature person. Uh, and sometimes, people fall out of the right kinds of habits and regress into something like that, or they go through something in life which mutilates some part of themselves that had previously been more developed. It's not simply that once you become mature, you stay in maturity.
Yep.
There's always a question of regression and falling back down. I think, the first time I really thought seriously about the concept of maturity was actually in reading Max Weber, who complained a lot in his work about the immaturity of the bourgeoisie. And it struck me that this is quite similar to this kind of Hellenic or Greek complaint about a lack of self-love.
Hmm.
The bourgeoisie are too focused on what they need for Weber to be able to focus on the needs of the German state.
Hmm.
So the German state or German society, this is a common knowledge object. The good of these things is something that people who are in political positions and leadership positions have to be interested in. And they have to subordinate their private drives that are to do with themselves and their pleasure or their rank to this common knowledge object and act in the service of it. So, of course, we can have objections to the specific common knowledge object that Weber was focused on, say the German state or German society. But we might nonetheless take up some of this style of thinking. If you have people who are not able to come together on a common knowledge object, I think you have immaturity. If you have people who can't subordinate their need for pleasure or their need for recognition, and sometimes even a desire for fairness, which is fairness for me, if you're stuck in that and you're evaluating continuously everything in terms of, am I getting a good deal? Then I think you can't really move into this other kind of mode. Whether that's a mode that's focused on family or focused on political units like the state or society, or on something even larger like the cosmos, God, something very, very big and huge. Some kind of abstraction, the good of which is not simply reducible to what feels good to you today. To me, that's really where maturity is. And then a mature disagreement is a disagreement about that, as
Hmm.
opposed to a disagreement about what's going to make me feel good today.
So I would say you have to be, and this is not the best way to say it, and it's probably going to be more confusing for anyone listening. But you have to be postmodern enough. Like you have to kind of be willing to let go of certain self concepts or private concepts or principles or supposed kind of principles. Like you have to be willing to let these things go and kind of understand the world doesn't work that way. Because we all have private beliefs. We all have these kind of concepts upon which we hang our sense of self. And you have to be willing to let that go, and you have to be willing to like live in the kind of negation of your own private world, in order to actually live in the world, the real world, the world that everyone else lives in. And I think that's the good type of postmodernism. Like you have to be willing to kind of let it all be what it is, and not worry so much about having definite labels, concrete definitions, and things that you will never let go, in order to be able to really grasp like the one thing that that actually does matter, to say the one, or to say the good, or whatever that kind of common knowledge object is. So if it is, for the sake of the family, or for the sake of the interpersonal relationship, or the organization, or the idea of communism, or the cosmos and God and time and this and that. But in doing that, and I think allowing for this kind of like postmodern disillusion of this kind of concrete, calcified vision of yourself and the world around you, that we're not born with it, but we come into it as we're children. And then you have this moment of subjective destitution where you go through the reconstruction, and you realize it's not black and white, but everything is, shades of gray. But there is still like the one, like there is the good, capital G, good. I think, I have, my understanding of the good or the one or whatever. I think it's very postmodern, because I think it doesn't really matter what it is, or what language people use to try to describe it. Like, I'm willing to just accept it and say, okay, sure. We'll probably never agree on what to call it or how to define it, but I don't think we would ever could possibly know what it is. Like, I think it's noumenal in this sense, where like it is just this thing outside, so far outside of us, that it's foolish to try to put a label on it. So it doesn't matter. And so we can just accept it and say, well, yeah, sure, I'll go along with it. I do believe in good. I do believe in truth. I don't know what any of that means. And it doesn't matter, because those allow me to construct a worldview and like an ethical framework where I can believe there is the possibility of doing good in the world.
Yeah, the possibility of doing it. So if you try to explain what the good is in itself,
Yeah.
you get lost, because the good in itself is an abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you attempt to concretize that, conceptualize it, operationalize it, that it becomes something specific. In becoming something specific, you're able to do something with it, but also now it's something specific. So it's not the one, it's not everything. It's something specific. It tasks you with something in particular to do. So, for instance, I had to run an errand for Sam at a conference I was at. She needed something at the store, and I had to go get it. I had to go for a 40-minute walk to a store to go get it. So, and it was cold, and I wasn't wearing perhaps quite what I should be wearing. So it was a tough errand. And in the period in which I'm running the errand, my love for Sam means concretely, I have to run this errand. It means only this thing. It means nothing else. I can only run this unpleasant errand, which is making my body uncomfortable and unhappy. by deciding that the love that I have for Sam means this errand and only this errand at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once the errand is complete, then it reopens and it can mean all kinds of different things. But for the duration of that errand, it only means that one thing, just that one thing. And
Mm-hmm.
it's clear as day while I'm running the errand that that is precisely what it means in this specific moment. But if you were to ask me, does love mean running an errand in the cold?
No.
Well, it can't mean just that. It
Yeah.
might mean that, you know, that might be part of it, maybe. But of course, in a big picture theoretical sense, no, that's not literally the definition of love.
Mm.
But actually, in some sense, it is
Mm-hmm.
in that situation that called for it to mean that specific thing. And for me, that's how these concepts open and then also are deployed. In deploying them, you close them up, they come to mean something narrow, something very specific, but that allows you to take them up and use them. So when I perform that errand, I perform it in the full devotion
Mm-hmm.
of that big concept of love because it means just that thing to me in that period of time. And then once the errand is complete, I don't hold on to that and go, well, see, my love is complete. I completed the task and therefore it's done. I reopen what it can mean, and then it can mean different things at other points in the day and in other days over the course of that week.
Yeah, that would be like turning yourself into a large language model if if you like were just instantiated in that moment and found yourself where you had this dawning awareness of love means doing this right now in this moment. And then you kind of closed up shop and said forever, this is what love means. So because I did that thing for you that one time, that's obviously what it means. Of course I love you. I win every argument. Hallelujah. We won. But that would be like Benjamin GPT. But it does seem to be the case that that's what people crave. People want concrete definitions. People want, this is what this means, always and forever, only this, nothing above or below or outside or left or right of this.
Yeah. And you could take it up another level, right? So love can mean loving Sam,
Yeah.
which then meant that specific thing on that day. But love in the big picture, full sense, doesn't just mean loving Sam. It might mean loving the book that I'm working on. It might
Yeah.
mean loving you today in this conversation. It might mean any number of different things. And in different moments, I have to decide which of these loves to orient toward and focus on. So if Sam were to message me in the middle of this and say that she needs something, I would have to make a decision about in this moment, what does love as a principle require of me? And I'd have to make it mean something in particular. And this would necessarily be to exclude, because of my limited body and the limited unit of time, something would not get taken care of as well as ideally it should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
If I had a limitless body, I would love everything totally and completely all at once, but I can't.
Yeah. Making the necessary trade-offs is the mature thing to do. Being unwilling, now being unable, that's a completely different story. We're not talking about people who can't do things for whatever reason, cognitively or emotionally, whatever. We don't even need to talk about that. But people who are unwilling to make those trade-offs, people who will turn mountains into mole hills, and kind of cling to these concrete definitions. Well, you must obviously not love me, or you must obviously be a bad person because you're unwilling. I always get insecure when I say it, but I think that's like that's a very kind of postmodern position in a good way. I think I almost always use postmodern in a good thing. Like I think we have to be postmodern enough to not get stuck on definitions and labels.
Which is funny because a lot of the time when I use this kind of language, I think of myself as thinking in a pre-modern way.
Maybe that's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know. I'd probably have to think about that more. But I do think there's something in modernity that demands definite kind of mathematical thinking, where you have to have the large language model thinking. Everything has to be an absolute definition. Everything has to be an absolute identification. Everything is a commodity. Words themselves have been turned into commodities. Conversations are actually economic because they can affect your life and livelihood if you perform poorly at them. So there is the economy of language, or the commoditization of language. So there is something in modernity that I'm specifically calling out when I say postmodern. So I think you thinking pre-modern, me thinking postmodern. Maybe it is just that. Maybe I should use different language because it's
because you also want to uphold Descartes, who is often thought of
the
as the
father of
modern thinker
modernity.
par excellence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is a thing I think about a lot, and it is an insecurity that I have, because I think it does more to confuse than it does to really elucidate what I'm getting at. And what I'm getting at, I think, is modernity has always been a political project in the first place. Like it
Yeah.
yeah.
It's possible to think in this way at any point in human history. The frequency, I think, with which and the distribution of people able to think in this way
Yeah.
has varied at various points in time. But I don't think there has ever been a part of human history that has excluded it outright. I
Mm.
think there are better and worse kinds of ancient thinking. There's, very dogmatic iterations of medieval religions, and then there's very thoughtful, open, very philosophical kinds of medieval religion that are much more interesting, that people maybe don't hear so much about these days, but I think have a lot to say for them. And the same goes for modernity. There are some modern thinkers that think in a very interesting and compelling way that have a real openness to what concepts can be. And then there are others who are trying to scientize and schematize and are very rigid and definitional in their orientation. And the same goes for, I think, postmodern thinkers. We have some postmodern thinkers who are wrestling with this as a historical situation where there's a lot of disagreement. It's difficult to adjudicate. And then there are other people who are essentializing that and reifying it and treating it like it applies in a transhistorical way to every phase and
Mm-hmm.
every period of
Mm-hmm.
human history. The same level of disagreement, the same level of fundamental difference, even in some cases. The real excess, I think, of postmodernity is a tendency to big up difference.
I I definitely agree with you there, but um I I also think difference matters in it, and I think negativity matters, and I mean I think everything. I think I construct my ethical framework and my moral and ethical framework and my kind of sense of self and view of the world around negativity and difference. Um,
I certainly think there are some differences. Like when we were discussing artists and theorists, I think there is a difference there.
yeah,
There is. It's not just that wouldn't be a disagreement. It's not that the artist and the theorist disagree. It's that there's a difference in the drive, in the fundamental disposition, perhaps. So
yeah,
I do think there are differences. I think that the bad kind of postmodernism
yeah,
takes that too far and uses it to break up all of society into fundamentally distinct groupings and then to completely isolate them from one another and create an impossibility of communication.
yeah,
Right? Because the theorist and the artist, in my discussion, they're different, but they can still talk to each other
yep,
because there is still something that they have in common that they're engaged with. They engage with it in a different way, but they do have a common object,
yeah,
beauty and the good being kind of two faces of the same thing. They're coming at it in different ways, but there is something that they still share.
Yeah. No, it does, like the dissimulation or the difference, like this infinite regression of difference. It does a horseshoe and it turns back around into you know, pure positivity, pure affirmation. It's just you're no longer a member of a society or a social or associates. You are the one. You yourself have become the one, and it becomes all about positivity and similarity. Once again, it's just there's nothing that has the positivity and similarity with you. And so it does a weird horseshoe all the way back around into supporting this hyper individual. I don't, but it is. And I think that's, I don't know. I almost wonder if there's a chicken and an egg there with modernity, where I think this kind of infinite fractal world that's made up, it's constituted out of particularities based on kind of the differences. I think that is the project of modernity, or the maybe not the intention behind modernity, but I think it's the outcome of modernity. Like I think the world we live in today is, I don't want to say necessary, but it's just an extrapolation of like the project of modernity, where everybody becomes the political individual. But then that starts to get weird too, because I don't think we should drop ourselves and be subsumed in the general. I don't think we should become just nodes in a collective. I do believe in the individual, or some type of individual.
There has to be a skepticism about the particular instantiations of universals. So any particular society, state, individual, any particular unit, family, there should be a certain level of skepticism about that particular thing and whether that particular thing really is good or really is as good as it could be. At the same time, I think we have to retain a, dare I say, faith in abstract universals prior to their deployment.
So, Nick Land responded to your conversation with Mikey.
Yeah, I saw that.
And I was taken aback. I personally don't think Nick Land is racist. I don't. I think he's smarter than that. But in the response, he said some very, I don't know, very rationalist, very utilitarian things. Like he basically said 1350, which that's the meme of all black people are 13% of the population. Why are they 50% of the crime rate or whatever? Like this stupid right-wing meme of saying there is essential difference and there is essential nature to racial categories. That's what it sounded like Nick was getting at in his response. And it was shocking to me because I don't think Nick is racist at all. And I kind of wonder where that's coming from. But it does raise the question of the kind of the particular, the universal, the singular. And that's, I don't know, that's an egg I've been trying to crack for a while. I know Mikey's been working at it. Dave's been working at it. Like we're trying to conceptualize, like, what is the difference between the singular, the particular, the general, the universal, and how can, like, generalizations often get made that support particularities, whereas we need a universal that supports singularities, because the universal cannot be operationalized and the singular isn't operationalized. But then these kind of broad generalizations get made that support particularities and particularist ideologies that are the race realist stuff. But yeah, it was a bit shocking to see Nick say that. Now, I only kind of half glanced at the screenshot because I'm not on Twitter and I don't really care all that much. But I don't know. The universals or generalizations, and I know you've kind of had this conversation too when you were talking. Who were you talking? You were talking about, was it Dugan or not? The other guy, not Dugan, but the guy who you said we should read rather than reading Dugan.
Oh, Samuel Huntington?
Yeah, I think you were talking about Huntington, Zizek, and someone else. It was a while ago.
Oh, this is the triangle of essentialism
Yes,
piece.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I put Dugan in the triangle, but with Huntington and then with Zizek.
Yeah.
Yeah. Using them as kind of stand-ins for particular instantiations of views, which could be more universalist in their structuring, but have, because of the circumstances under which we're operating, become more essentialist in
Mm-hmm.
recent years. And in doing that, I wasn't trying to suggest that Dugan, Huntington, and Zizek are incapable of thinking about them in universalist ways. Indeed, you can point to many instances in which they have thought in universalist ways.
Yeah.
But to instead emphasize that the historical conditions under which we're operating are distressing people in such a way that they are reaching that height with less frequency and less consistency and are often settling for. And I think this is true of a lot of thinkers. I think a lot of thinkers are capable in a good moment, in the right environment, of thinking in terms of the universal. But in a distressed environment, which Twitter often is, there is a pressure to particularize and to defend because of the player versus player character of Twitter.
Yeah.
There's a tendency to get in your feelings a bit. It's one of the things I don't like about you know, comments on a YouTube video.
Yeah.
It makes you aware of this player versus player. How am I being received? It kind of puts you in the reception.
Yeah.
Like in this conversation, in part because it's not being recorded live, at no point in this conversation have either of us referred to how we're being received.
Right.
So I've been able to focus just on what you're saying. And this was also a benefit that I had in the conversation with Mikey that I recorded for Political Theory 101. There's just nobody else around.
Yep.
So I can just try to understand the person I'm talking to. Like if I, the other day I did an episode of the Sublation podcast with Doug. And in that one, there's commentary, and occasionally Doug will surface one of the comments, and then it becomes less I'm talking to Doug about something that we're interested in, and it becomes talking to some amorphous third person whose content is continuously shifting and not evident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it changes the character of it.
So that, yeah, like that ersatz digital other or virtual other. That does change.
And that person is here. We just forget about them.
Yeah.
And they're not regularly being brought up as we go.
Yeah. And I think, there's a tone and tempo of conversations. Like when they're live streamed, it changes the tone. It changes the tempo. It also changes the content because it changes our relation to the conversation. Like, yeah, we are just kind of here. It's just the two of us for now. So at least phenomenologically, we're here in the moment, and we're more easily able to bracket out the virtual other, the ersatz other.
Yeah, there's having a conversation like we're sat at a coffee shop, and then there's trying to have a conversation while we're swimming.
Yeah, in full view of kind of everyone. But I think a lot about that as well. And I think going back to when we were at the Garner's farm, when we talked about communication versus conversation, and we were talking about a lot of good stuff. That was like a great kind of experience that I feel lucky for having been able to be a part of. but that did kind of come up a little bit, and like the feedback, the audience feedback into the act of conversating. I don't know. Like, there is a large part of me that I don't believe in persuasion. I think you should not try to persuade people. You should only try to present what it is that you're saying in an appealing fashion, but not in a persuasive fashion. But I also think that's...
City on a hill.
Yeah. I also think that's silly. I think, no, we should be persuasive. Like, don't we believe in the good?
There are times and places where you can persuade people, but most of the time you would be doing something else. If we have a kind of shared understanding that we have a common knowledge object, we're both trying to understand it. We are mature people who are both trying to understand it. So we're having a conversation about it for the purposes of understanding it, and we're both engaged in it in that spirit. We both are talking about the same thing, and we know that we're talking about the same thing. I'm not suspicious of you. You're not suspicious of me. In that kind of context, real persuasion might happen.
As opposed to this.
But in other contexts, it's going to be something else.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I'm going to try to have an effect on you with propaganda because I think you're a barbaric other.
Yeah.
That can't be approached in that kind of way. I don't think you've got philautia. I don't think you've been constructed. So I'm going to try to make you think something.
Yeah.
By doing something that comes out of social science research on you.
Mm-hmm.
You're a subject of a discourse that's coming from research. That's a different kind of interaction. Fundamentally different. It's not persuasion. It's word sorcery.
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of people on Twitter and in the professional class, they love the idea that they can do word sorcery.
Yeah.
That they can say something and have an effect on a barbaric other that causes the barbaric other to act as if it were civilized. They're not civilizing the other, but they are using word magic to paper over the incivility of the other.
Yep. And it simulates a kind of reconciliation. It's papering over a real difference and not engaging with that real difference and not engaging with that contradiction and not allowing it to unfold, because the sorcerer in this instance doesn't view the other as worthwhile or valuable or having enough moral and ethical worth to engage with. I wonder, the audience, the ersatz digital virtual other, is it good to view them as not worth engaging with? And I feel horrible saying that, but bracketing out the audience in that way does seem to allow us to get into a kind of setting where we are able to have a conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to be the sorcerer.
Right.
I don't want to be a discourse mage. So I don't want to treat the audience as a subject of my speech.
Right. But it feels like
if I can't have a real discussion with the audience, then what is my alternative if I'm going to interact with the audience, but to treat them as subjects of my discourse magic?
Yeah. Yes.
So if I bracket them out, then I don't have to treat them as subjects of my discourse magic.
Yeah.
And I can suspend judgment about whether they're people I really could have a discussion with. And what I can instead do is model a discussion I'd like to have.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe some people who are in the audience will in some other way, shape, or form get in touch with me. Maybe they'll sign up for Theory Underground. They'll send me an email. Something will happen. And then a real discussion will take place between me and some of them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the theory I operate on.
Yeah. I think I do like that. And I think it is modeling. It absolutely is modeling. And sometimes there is an element where it becomes libidinal and it becomes like, I'm not even going to say sometimes, a lot of the times, like being live on the internet is fun or pleasurable or whatever. So there's like this libidinal joy, even sometimes, that comes from engaging and having backs and forths with the audience. But yeah, I think the best way to interact with them is to model the types of conversation that we're aiming for and that we're trying to have with each other and we're trying to achieve just in general. The
Yeah, I don't
internet.
like it when it gets combative. Yeah,
Oh, I
I
can't. Yeah.
often don't like that. Don't like that. You know, so I don't really
I,
like to fight the audience or fence with the audience. It's not fun for me.
yeah. I don't. I know there have been times that I have stooped so low as to kind of yell at them and make examples out of them. But it is gross, and I don't love doing it. I don't even like doing it, and I think it does detract from the conversation that we're trying to have.
Because we're able to really build up a head of steam.
Yeah,
But if we go off on different rails
yeah.
because of stuff we see, we won't be able to build up that head of steam and keep it going.
So the audience member who like raises their hand and interrupts you as you're giving this kind of discourse publicly, because that's kind of what, at least that's a way to analogize what we're doing. We're having a public discourse, and then the audience member,
Yeah.
the chat member who keeps saying the thing that causes one or the other of the interlocutors to be distracted and address them. They're the guy who kind of shouts out in the crowd, and they shouldn't. Like, hey, you shouldn't do that. You should be calm and respectful and patient in public. Everyone on the internet, where did your manners go? What happened? But it is
I like a
also
Q&A at
true.
the end.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's the appropriate way to handle it. Do a short Q&A or even a long Q&A, and then the follow-up. Like I do want to talk to people. I want to read what people write. I want to hear what they have to say. I want them to listen to me and listen, like engage with what's actually happening. I don't want to just do this simulated socializing. I have friends. I don't come to the internet to socialize. I do come to the internet to try to achieve whatever it is we're trying to achieve. Discourse. I don't know. I don't
It
know.
varies depending on what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's not always the same thing.
But I don't know. Like, what if the only way for this person, this audience member, like they need to disagree, essentially? Like, that's what they're doing. They're disagreeing, and yes, they're libidinally invested in it, and yes, they should probably find something else to do with their time, touch grass. But I don't know, just like on the subject of disagreement and like the audience members being unable to hold in their disagreement and them just kind of bursting at the seams with disagreement. Like, is there a way that we can use the internet to address that type of disagreement?
So I think that we can get mature disagreement if we're able to find the people who are able to disagree in a mature way about the things that we're interested in figuring out. We can get those people by modeling a conversation where that kind of disagreement takes place
Mm-hmm.
and inviting those people to come and participate in that kind of discussion. We can get those people. The difficulty is that we also will have people on the internet who are disagreeing in an immature way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that we are in position to make an intervention in an immature person's life over YouTube such that they become mature and the disagreement becomes mature disagreement. And I think that this has been the kind of the hill that people have been trying to scale on the internet for a long time. And nobody's ever really able to do this because in the moment you're trying to say something on a live stream that has to stand in for decades of whatever they didn't get.
Mm.
And that's not going to be doable. So I start thinking in terms of, can I protect the discussion, the mature disagreement, from the immaturity? Or will the immaturity infect the discussion? The discussion ceases to be about the common knowledge object and then becomes an immature thing where either I'm dunking on them, they're dunking on me, or I'm trying to stop them from dunking. And now we're playing basketball. It's just not what we were doing. I like playing real basketball, but
Mm.
that's not even real basketball. That's just a bad, analogy of basketball. To me, it becomes about protecting it so that the person who might actually find the conversation can find it, and they won't find it if it seems like we're in immature disputes. If they turn on a video and we seem to be in an immature thing, then they're not going to come to us. They
Yeah.
won't think that we can offer it. So it becomes about protecting.
Mm. There's been YouTube drama that I love YouTube. I've been watching YouTube since like 2007, 2008. I don't know. I've been watching YouTube since near the beginning of YouTube. And when it started, it was just for like entertainment, and it was like while I was at work or whatever. Oh, let me watch a little 3-minute video of somebody falling off a jet ski, or like whatever. YouTube's changed a lot in its time. And for the past maybe decade, I've used YouTube as like a podcast app. Back in the day, they used to have Google Plus and YouTube Red, and it's basically what YouTube Premium is now. And I think they just raised the price, so I might have to no longer have YouTube Premium, which would be a shame. But I've had YouTube Red, YouTube Premium forever, so you can play your video and turn your phone screen off and leave it in your pocket or whatever and go on about your day. And usually it's working. And so I would just listen to podcast episodes that were put on YouTube. And so I've used YouTube as like a pathway to education. Listening to podcasts, lectures. I mean, there's infamous lectures that live on YouTube, like the infamous yellow tinted Michael Parenti lecture, and Rick Roderick. And they're like, YouTube is a vast resource of education, or it can be. Not to say that it is, but it can be engaged with as a vast resource of education. It can also be just a horrible, disgusting dumpster fire. But there's some current YouTube drama that it's getting people from like 2015 that used to do like this sensational pranks and stupid vape cartridges, like just dumb, like 2015, 2016 era, just kind of immature enjoyment. Everybody's having a good time. We still don't understand the future that we live in yet. It's kind of an extension of the 1990s in a way, where everyone is in this everyone is infinitely 25 years old. And just everything is funny. Everything's a gag. But it's weird because there are people now who are addressing like Israel, Palestine, like Gaza, like it's this important thing that really matters. But it's being turned into like interpersonal drama, very immature shit-slinging contests where people are making like personal attacks on people. I don't know. I don't even know what I was initially, why I brought this up, but it's just very interesting to see how the most immature kind of garbage does rise to the top. But nevertheless, there still is like a wealth of worthwhile stuff on the internet.
Yeah, there's a lot of immature disagreement about incredibly important and serious issues
Whew.
that we're better off not discussing than discussing that way.
Yeah. No, it's taking Gaza and turning it into interpersonal drama, I think.
Into an ego thing for people who are looking for recognition, looking
Yeah.
for, of course, clicks and streams and looking for a moment where they feel good. A lot of these issues where it's, do you have the right take or the wrong take?
Very transactional.
The right or the wrong take is not anything to do with trying to figure out, like, what would it mean to have peace in that part of the world? What could a peace look like? What's the best kind of peace that's possible? What would the steps be that we would need to take? It wouldn't be about having the right attitude to the specific things that are happening there now. That wouldn't have anything to do with simply normatively going bad or good to something that's happening.
Yeah.
Wouldn't get us to where we would like it to be. It's more about trying to rank ourselves and who feels right, who feels the way they should feel versus who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with solving the problem there, which is a war. It's a conflict. It's violence. It's serious problems. And do you have the right attitude to it doesn't touch any of that.
Yeah.
Lately I've been bothered a lot by the analogies that people have been using for current events. It's just a lot of World War II analogies as a way of trying to say you should feel as bad about this as you can feel about anything. You should feel as bad about this as you should feel about Hitler and fascism. Yeah. And anyone who doesn't recognize that this is analogous or comparable to Hitler or fascism through the use of certain language which clearly invokes and reminds you of Hitler and fascism, that such a person doesn't have the right attitude and is therefore bad because they will not accept the maximalist account of how bad it is what is occurring. And the whole conversation stays at the level of how bad is what is occurring. And it's just a question of you judging how bad it is. And do you judge it to be as bad as possible? Or do you go, well, it's not as bad as some other things. And that's the whole discussion, is how bad is it on the scale of badness? And there's never really any attempt to understand how it could end, what ending would look like. There's a kind of implicit theory that if everybody thought that it was as bad as the Nazis, then that in and of itself would be sufficient to end it. So all you have to do is convince everyone to have that attitude to it. And maybe you do this by saying, if you don't have this attitude to it, what's wrong with you? You must be a bad person. Let me try to fire you or dox you or ruin your life. So you do it not just by trying to persuade, but by trying to intimidate. And you use all that social science discourse magic to bully. But yeah, there's no attempt really to understand it as a complex problem, which requires thinking through where we would go and how we would go.
Yeah, that's very, I think that perfectly kind of demonstrates the need that society in general feels for definitions and labels. The fact that there's a ranking and they're trying to say, well, it's as bad as Hiroshima, it's as bad as Auschwitz-Birkenau. Like it's just as bad as these things. Like people are trying to identify rather than understand and do something to change. But I wonder if, I could definitely blame the content creators that are just fucking like continually shitting out this content, because I think it is horrible and disgusting. And I think the world would be better without that type of content. Like, I think this is an instance of don't do this. Like, bad art is worse than no art at all. Like in this case, like bad political discourse is worse than no political discourse. I don't know. But I can't blame the people who watch that content, because I feel like everyone is in this free fall where nothing is real and nothing makes sense. And so people crave definitions. People crave something concrete to ground themselves, because their self-concept is in free fall.
Yeah, the content creators think that they're better than the people that they make the content for. So they think they can do discourse magic on those people. But in truth, I think the content creators are just as bad, if not perhaps worse, because what ultimately motivates the content creator is that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
In most of these cases, the content creator isn't really motivated by trying to end the conflict. And there may be some people in the audience who imagine that this person is a leader who knows something about how to solve the problem, and that by taking direction from this person, they are contributing to a solution. There might be some people in the audience who really think that they're trying to solve the problem. They may just be confused. But the person who makes this kind of content isn't trying to solve the problem. And that, I think, is more lost than the audience member who happens to be following the wrong guide.
So I don't keep up on the new. Mikey and I, when back in 2023, when was it? Yeah, it was 23, October 23, when this current round of Israel Palestine, even talking about it it's hard to talk about. But back in 2023, Mikey and I had a conversation, and I was surprised that he said he feels we have a duty to remain informed, which I think is probably true. I think it is important that we make an effort to inform ourselves of what's happening around the world. But my statement at the time was I was already done hearing about it. I was already kind of fed up with the infinite content mill that surrounded that surrounded Gaza, Israel, Palestine, whatever. And it seems that it's only gotten worse. Israel hasn't stopped murdering Palestinians, so of course the content mill is only going to continue to get worse. But I do my best to avoid it. I do my best to avoid the news. In general, I used to read the news a lot when I thought of myself as an engaged political subject. I read the news and I tried my best to stay informed, and I read multiple sources, and I felt good about the fact. I used to watch the Majority Report. I used to read journals, and I felt good. I was a news person. But the last 5 years, I do my best to avoid the news, but I still seem to get it, no matter what. There are certain news topics that I can't hide from. And I know you. Yeah, I think of you as probably the most informed person I know. And I think it's a good thing. I like the fact that you managed to stay informed but not lose it. I think always trying to be informed causes one's mind to break.
Well, one of the things that makes it such that I don't agree with the general injunction to stay informed, I don't think that people have an obligation to stay informed, is that most people are not in a position to judge what would be informed or what would count as information, because they don't have enough time available to develop the kind of assessment and judgment skills that are necessary. It's not reducible to the kind of basic media literacy questions that when you're in school, it's supposed that it is. Do you know whether this is a credible source? Well, the truth is there are no credible sources. There are sources that are motivated in various ways, and you have to know all of the basic motivations underlying all of the different media sources that are out there in the landscape. So when you read something, you see something, you know the motivation in connection to it. So you therefore know what it might exaggerate or what it might be inclined to play up or play down. And you also know how do I find something which is motivated differently? And this gets reduced a lot of the time to, do you read both left-wing and right-wing news sources or
Yeah.
something? But there's a lot of much more discrete, concrete interests, lots of different kinds of positions within the left and the right. And it takes just an enormous amount of time and experience following this stuff to be able to track and keep up with all of these things. And in cases where you encounter an outlet that you haven't spent much time with, to remember that you don't know precisely where it sits in this, and therefore to be a little careful with what you do with it. So, the simple way of putting this would be the news is not the news.
Mm.
You are not informed because you watch the news or you read the news. You are only informed if you have the capacity to judge the news.
Mm. Judgment, discernment, maturity. I don't know. These are all related to disagreement and trying to, I don't know, cope with, deal, address, reconcile to intractable disagreement. Well, that's the game of politics. And politics is difficult. Politics isn't just a thing that you can subscribe to the right outlet or streamer or point of view and buy the pin and the hat and the t-shirt and say, you did it, I won, I'm on the right team. Politics is hard. There are stakes. Politics demands a lot of the political subject. And I wish
there's so many people that are doing the discourse magic and just trying to get you to, as an effect of you having read or seen their content, have a particular view. They're not trying to have a conversation with you. It's media. You're meant to consume it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a discussion. So anytime that you engage with journalism or any of this stuff, really, people are trying to do things to you and you have to resist all of the various things that they're trying to do to you. And you have to recognize all of the tactics that they're deploying to try to make you feel various ways. And these things have to be refused, which means you need energy as you engage with this stuff to go, well, I don't have to take that up. Well, that's, pushing it further than it goes. You have to do all of these. And it takes not just a lot of time, but energy infused time as you're consuming the news content. It can't be at the end of your workday, you go home and watch the nightly news.
Yeah.
That won't work.
Yeah. We need non-economic spaces where people can come and have genuine discourse or genuine conversation to develop shared understanding, community of knowers, community of thinkers, all these things. We need them. And that's not what the internet does. Just the other day, somebody sent me a message of a blog post of someone pining for 2005 and the good old days of Blogspot and WordPress and Tumblr. And I started my first blog in 2003. I was a blogger back then, and then I kind of quit that for a long time. But I remember the kind of halcyon days of blogging. I think probably the peak of blogging was like the end of the 90s. So by the time I started blogging, it was already on the down. But the piece, I read it and I empathized with the woman who wrote it. But that's not what the internet does. That's not what the internet is for. Like, the internet is not for conversation. The internet is not for discourse. The internet is not a place where you can come easily and kind of have mature disagreements. The internet is this very immature space where all the disagreements are sensationalized and everything is just kind of drama, content, bullshit. And it's all
Web 3.0.
Yeah. It's sad. It's sad. The internet isn't built for that. We have to construct a medium. We have to construct the platforms. We have to construct the technology or the technological solution to the question of, where do we go to have conversations? I empathize with that woman who was pining for communication, but like genuine connection with her audience and genuine conversation. But that's not what the internet's for. That's not what the internet does. It takes kind of committed sacrifice on the part of everyone involved, all the interlocutors. You can't just show up to the internet and have a conversation. You actually have to come to a community, to use the word I hate, and build it. Like, if you build it, they will come. Well, you have to build it first, and then you can come. And everyone involved, I think, has to have some skin in the game. If you're on the sidelines as a member of an audience and you want to get involved, there is a way to get involved. There is a way to become part of the conversation, but it's not free. Now, I hate the fact that it does almost always come back to economics and kind of material conditions and material needs and stuff. But I'm not saying it's not free, like you go pay for it somewhere. I'm saying it's not free. Like, you can't just show up and have a conversation. You have to actually build it over time, and be invested in it, time energetically, not financially. I want to live in the world.
If you were holding it in a physical building, it would be evident that you would need to do something to sustain the property.
Yeah. Well, and that's the illusion of the internet. People can't see, the computers that we're on right now. People can't really see the homes that we're in right now. The physical objects that are supporting the conversation are invisible. And like, all the economic activity that's gone into this conversation is hidden by the internet. It's just in your face. It's on the screen, and it's happening right now. Next Sunday, come to the conversation. You have to fight back against that. As an observer, as an audience member. And if you want to have a conversation with somebody, you have to build conditions that make conversation possible in the first place. And those are our time energetic institutions, our T3 institutions, where we can actually come and discover our talents and develop them under the tutelage of someone. And that demands time, energy. So, I think wanting to have a conversation with you about disagreement, I think in the moment, the little contrarian in me was peeking up over the fence and waving his hand and saying, pay attention to me. And I resisted the urge, because I understood that if I were to speak up in the moment, it would just derail conversation, and you had to flow to what you were doing. And I actually just sat and listened, and the disagreement disappeared. And I discovered there was no disagreement at all. And I kind of observed and soaked in what you were saying. I'm glad we came on and had this conversation. No, I think it was better than I anticipated. I am feeling a little under the weather, so I kind of was hoping that this would be a good conversation. I think it was a great conversation, Benjamin. Thank you. I love it when we're able to actually get into the weeds a little bit and have real conversations. So thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here. And thanks for having me on. I knew that when you suggested that I come on, that there would be something good, because you are not frivolous. Usually, if you have something you want to do, there is something real underlying it. So I knew it would be good, and I think it was.
Heck yeah. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.